They tell you to chase greatness, but they never tell you what it takes to keep it. They don't tell you about the years that blur together, when your only reward is exhaustion. They don't mention the nights you question if it's worth it, or the mornings you rise anyway, because quitting would cost even more. Greatness doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives in private, in the quiet, unseen places, where you choose to keep going, long after everyone else has stopped watching. The truth is, you don't find greatness. You pay for it. With your comfort, your peace, your former self. You pay in silence, in sacrifice, in the small invisible choices that no one ever celebrates. And the hardest part? It's not a struggle. It's knowing that even when you give everything, no one may ever understand what it took. But that's the point. Because greatness was never meant to be witnessed. It was meant to be earned. Earned in the shadows. Proven in the pain. And when you finally rise, it's not pride you feel. It's peaceful. Because you'll know. You paid in full. And that's where every story of greatness begins. Not with glory, but with a debt. Chapter 1: The Debt of Greatness. Every person who's ever touched greatness has owed something to it. Before the trophies, before the applause, before the world even knew their name, they felt it. That quiet pressure in the soul, that unshakable awareness that they were built for more than ordinary life. It's not arrogance. It's not ego. It's a debt. A debt to their own potential. A promise whispered in the dark that who they are today will not be the limit of who they become. And the moment you feel that debt, you can never go back. Because greatness doesn't ask for permission. It demands payment. Payment in patience, in discipline, in the hours no one will ever count. It takes your comfort first, then it takes your certainty, and then it takes your excuses. The people around you may never understand it. To them, it'll look like an obsession. To you, it'll feel like duty. You stop chasing balance. You stop seeking approval. Because the truth is, you're not working for applause. You're paying off a debt to the version of yourself who refused to settle. Every repetition, every lonely morning, every moment you keep going, when no one notices, is a small payment on a promise. The promise that one day, it will all mean something. But no one tells you. The interest in greatness never stops. Even when you think you've earned it, it asks for more. More patience. More clarity. More faith in the process. When the process is all you have. The weak call it unfair. The strong call it the price. Because greatness doesn't belong to those who want it. It belongs to those who owe it. Every time you think about stopping, remember, the world doesn't need your potential. It needs your payment. It needs you to endure long enough for your debt to turn into destiny. You don't owe the crowd anything. You don't owe the doubters anything. You owe the promise you made to yourself on the day you decided not to quit. You see, the debt of greatness is silent at first. It doesn't scream at you. It waits. It waits in your hesitation. It waits in your distractions. It waits every time you say tomorrow. And when tomorrow comes, it's still there. That's how you know it's real. It doesn't go away when life gets hard. It becomes the reason you survive it. When everything around you collapses, the debt stays. It doesn't pity you. It doesn't forgive you. It reminds you. You still owe something to who you could be. That's what separates the almost great from the truly great. The almost great wait for ideal conditions. The truly great act as if every second counts. Because they know interest on wasted time is the highest cost in life. The average man wants rewards. The builder wants results. And the builder pays the price, long before he ever earns the crown. Greatness doesn't come in the form of opportunity. It comes in the form of pressure. Pressure that asks, how much more are you willing to give when you've already given everything? Pressure that strips you of comfort and leaves you with only discipline. It's in that moment, when no one's clapping, when the dream looks impossible, when the path makes no sense, that you realize the debt is personal. No one else can pay for it. No one else will even see it. But when you do pay it, something shifts. You stop asking, when will I get there? You start thinking, how much more can I give? That's when you become unstoppable. Because the moment you stop negotiating with the price, you've already bought the life others only wish for. The world will call it sacrifice. But to you, it'll feel like peace. Because you'll know, you didn't quit halfway. You didn't run when it got costly. You stayed. You paid. And you became. Every chapter of greatness begins with this truth. You don't get to have both ease and evolution. You can't hold comfort and carry destiny at the same time. One must be released for the other to rise. And if that feels unfair, remember, greatness has never been free. It has always belonged to those willing to pay first and be seen later. The crowd won't understand your choices, but history will. And when it does, it won't call you lucky. It'll call you paid in full. You pay the debt in silence. You pay it in sacrifice. But you never pay it once. Because the moment you start climbing, a new price appears. It's the cost hidden inside every dream, the quiet ache of wanting more. They call it ambition. But ambition is not a gift. It's a hunger that never lets you rest. And the truth about it is far from comfortable. Chapter 2: The Uncomfortable Truth About Ambition. Ambition. The word we're taught to love. The fire we're told to chase. But no one tells you that ambition has a shadow. They show you its light, the drive, the hunger, the progress. But they hide its cost, the sleepless nights, the silent fear that no matter how far you go, it'll never be enough. Ambition gives you purpose, and then quietly take your peace. It makes you build higher, but never tells you when to stop. It whispers that you're meant for more, and it's right, but it never says what more will take from you. Because ambition doesn't care how you feel. It only cares that you keep moving. It will feed you direction, but starve you of rest. It will keep you awake when everyone else sleeps, not out of discipline, but out of fear of being forgotten. That's the uncomfortable truth. Ambition looks noble on the outside, but inside, it's messy, lonely, and relentless. The same dream that gives you meaning can also make you miserable. Because ambition doesn't just build. It consumes. It doesn't ask politely. It takes everything that stands in its way. Your comfort, your relationships, your sense of peace. And if you're not careful, it will take you too. The pursuit of greatness always begins as a dream, but somewhere along the way, it becomes a debt you can't stop paying. You stop working towards something and start working against time. You start confusing exhaustion with effort, busyness with purpose, progress with peace. You tell yourself you're chasing fulfillment, but really, you're running from the fear of never being enough. That's the cruelest part about ambition. It never lets you arrive. Every finish line turns into another race. Every victory feels smaller than the one you imagined. You reach one mountain, and all you see is the next one waiting. And deep down, you start to wonder if you even like climbing anymore. But you keep going, because stopping feels like dying. That's ambition. It's not a dream. It's a fire. And if you don't learn how to master it, it burns you from the inside out. There's a reason so many people who make it, I still feel empty. It's not because they failed. It's because they succeeded and realized the summit isn't what they thought it'd be. You see, ambition promises completion, but delivers continuation. It doesn't end. It evolves. And if you don't evolve with it, you become a prisoner of your own potential. Ambition is necessary, but dangerous when left unchecked, because it convinces you that the next milestone will finally give you peace. But peace doesn't come from arrival. It comes from alignment. And alignment is what most ambitious people lose first. They get addicted to the chase, to prove something no one's asking them to prove. They mistake validation for value, and speed for direction, until one day they look up and realize they've been climbing the wrong mountain beautifully. That's the quiet tragedy of ambition. It doesn't destroy you suddenly. It drains you slowly, while convincing you that exhaustion is a badge of honor. But the truth is, ambition without peace is self-destruction in disguise. Because no matter what you build, if you lose yourself building it, it will never feel like a win. So you must learn to balance the fire, to let it drive you, but never define you. You must learn to pause, not because you're weak, but because even engines burn out when they run without oil. The uncomfortable truth about ambition is that it asks for everything and returns very little. But for those who master it, for those who learn how to use it without being used by it, it becomes power in its purest form. Because once you stop needing ambition to prove your worth, you start using it to build your world. You no longer chase success to be seen. You chase it because it's who you are. That's the evolution. That's the difference between the restless and the fulfilled. One is driven by fear, the other by purpose. So, yes, ambition will take your peace. But if you're strong enough to face it, it will also give you meaning deeper than comfort could ever offer. And when you finally learn how to make peace with your own hunger, You realize that ambition wasn't your enemy. It was your teacher. It showed you the power of wanting more, and the wisdom of knowing when enough is enough. Because at the end of every dream, you'll find this simple truth. What you were chasing was never out there. It was waiting inside you the whole time. But the path forward comes with a price. Every step you take toward greatness quietly takes something behind you. That's the next lesson of this journey. The unseen exchange. Chapter 3. The unseen exchange. Every time you rise, something falls behind you. Every time you move forward, something quietly stays where you were. This is the truth no one wants to hear. Progress has a price. Every gain is an exchange. You don't just pay in money or effort. You pay in moments, in memories, in people who once fit your pace but no longer match your path. The world will celebrate your growth, but growth is rarely glorious up close. It's messy. It's lonely. It's filled with silent sacrifices no one will ever know you made. You'll lose parts of yourself you thought were permanent. The comfort of routine, the simplicity of not knowing better, the peace that came with lower expectations. Every version of you that outgrows something also buries something. That's the unseen exchange. To build what's next, you must break what was. People talk about chasing success, but success is a constant surrender. You let go of security to chase potential. You let go of approval to keep integrity. You let go of the familiar to stand in what you were called to do. And none of it feels good when it's happening. Because the closer you get to the life you want, the more you realize how much the old one costs to leave behind. Growth isn't addition, it's exchange. You trade rest for responsibility. You trade simplicity for significance. You trade what's easy to keep for what's hard to forget. That's the price. That's the part no one posts about. They show you the wins, but not the losses that came right before them. The friends who faded because they couldn't handle your hunger. The relationships that cracked under the pressure of your purpose. The quiet nights where you questioned if the cost was worth the crown. And yet you keep going. Not because you love losing things, but because you love what you're becoming more than what you're leaving. That's the mark of greatness. Not ambition, acceptance. The ability to look at the losses and still say, yes, I'll keep going. Because deep down, you know, if it costs your comfort but earns your clarity, it's not a loss. It's a transaction. The unseen exchange isn't meant to punish you. It's meant to purify you. It strips away what's weak. It reveals what's real. It removes what was built on ego, so you can rebuild on purpose. And while you're living through it, it feels like everything is falling apart. But it's not falling apart. It's falling into place. The exchange is sacred. It's how the universe measures your readiness. It asks you, how much are you willing to give for the life you say you want? Because greatness never comes to those who wish. It comes to those who trade. Those who give up what's good to create what's great. Those who understand that every yes to destiny is a no to distraction. That's why peace often feels farthest away, right before your breakthrough. You're not being punished. You're being exchanged. Your old limits for new standards. Your old fears for new strength. And it doesn't happen in one big decision. It happens in 1,000 quiet ones. The unseen exchange happens every time you wake up tired and still choose to show up. Every time you lose something you thought you needed, and still find gratitude. Every time you feel unseen, unheard, uncelebrated, and still build anyway. That's the trade. The pain for peace. The doubt for direction. The comfort for calling. No one witnesses it, but they'll feel the result. Because everything you've lost becomes the power behind what you create. Here's what no one tells you. Every step toward your purpose costs you a layer of who you used to be. The more you evolve, the lonelier it gets. Not because people disappear, but because alignment narrows your circle. You start needing less noise, less validation, less approval. You stop seeking comfort from others, because you finally found conviction in yourself. That's what the exchange does. It replaces applause with awareness. It takes away ease, so you can build endurance. And by the time you realize it, you've become the kind of person who can't go back to average because you've paid too much to return. That's the quiet reward of the unseen exchange. You lose count of what you lost because what you gained feels worth it. The crowd won't understand. They'll say you changed. And they'll be right. Because greatness always demands transformation. You'll outgrow the versions of yourself that needed permission. You'll outgrow the spaces that didn't demand your best. And every time you rise, you'll lose something, but you'll also find something greater. It's never fair, but it's always worth it. That's what makes the unseen exchange sacred. It's not a trade between you and the world. It's a trade between who you are and who you're still becoming. You can't keep both. And that's why the climb feels lonely. Because the version of you who started isn't meant to make it to the top. You'll have to let go of them to rise into who you were always meant to be. But here's the cruel paradox of greatness. Sometimes even when you win, it feels like you've lost everything. And that's where we go next. When winning feels like losing. Chapter 4. When winning feels like losing. They told you winning would fix everything. That when you finally made it, you'd feel light, free, complete. But what they didn't tell you is that victory comes with a strange kind of emptiness. The kind you can't post about. The kind that comes quietly, when the noise fades and the applause stops. You've worked for years to get here, and somehow, it still doesn't feel the way you thought it would. That's the truth no one warns you about. Sometimes winning doesn't feel like an arrival. It feels like a loss. You lose the chase. You lose the hunger that kept you moving. You lose the version of yourself that needed something to prove. And when you finally stand at the top, you realize the climb gave you meaning, but the summit gives you silence. You thought peace would meet you here. Instead, you find questions. Who am I without the fight? Who am I when the work is done? Because when your whole identity has been built around becoming, you don't know how to just be. That's the cost of greatness most never see. The world praises what you've built, but only you know what it took from you. You lose moments you can't get back. People who didn't understand the process. Parts of yourself that will never return the same. Winning changes you, not because of what you gain, but because of what you had to lose to get here. You lose innocence. You lose ease. You lose the simplicity of not knowing what you know now. And in the quiet that follows achievement, you start to feel something unexpected. Grief. Because no one talks about how success can feel like a funeral. A funeral for the years you gave away. The relationships that couldn't keep up. The joy you postponed for later. And never found the time to return to. You tell yourself it was worth it. And it was. But worth it doesn't mean painless. Sometimes the heaviest price is realizing that your dream came true, and you still feel a little lost inside it. That's what they don't tell you about the climb. You think the struggle hurts, until you feel the stillness after it ends. You've built a life out of chasing more, and now you have to learn how to live without the chase. You've built an identity out of proving people wrong, and now you have no one left to prove anything to. That's where the ache begins. Because when your worth has always been measured by motion, standing still feels like failure. Even when you're on top, even when you've won. You thought success would silence the doubt. But all it did was amplify it in quieter rooms. You thought reaching the goal would end the pain, but it only changed its name. Because the pain of failure and the pain of success often come from the same place, wanting more than you can hold. You begin to understand something. Winning doesn't always heal you. Sometimes it just exposes what never was. The loneliness you ignored, the relationships you neglected, the identity you built on effort instead of peace. That's when it hits you. Maybe the reward wasn't supposed to make you happy. Maybe it was supposed to make you aware. Aware of what you traded. Aware of what you became. Aware of what you're still missing. And awareness hurts. It strips away illusion, until all that's left is truth. And the truth is, winning changes nothing, if you don't change with it. You can reach everything you ever wanted, and still be haunted by the person who thought they'd feel different. That's why so many people keep climbing even after they've arrived. Not for the next success, but to escape the stillness that follows it. They mistake movement for meaning. But the work doesn't end when you win. It begins again. This time, inside. Now the battle is internal. The war between contentment and craving. Because greatness without peace is a prison with better lighting. You may look free, but if you still need more to feel worthy, you're still enslaved to the climb. That's the turning point only the wise reach. When they realize that success doesn't save you, it reveals you. It shows you whether your foundation was built on validation or vision. Whether you wanted greatness, or just wanted to feel enough. The pain of winning is clarity, the sudden awareness that what truly matters was never the crown, but the character that carried it. So if you feel empty at the top, you're not broken. You're just meeting yourself without distraction. And that meeting is sacred, because only in that silence can you finally ask the real question. Who am I without the fight? If you can answer that, you've won something deeper than success. You've found peace. But if you can't, you'll keep running. You'll keep building. You'll keep chasing ghosts of goals that were never meant to fill you. Because the truth is, the mountain was never the goal. You were. And once you realize that, you stop running to escape the pain and start walking to understand it. That's when greatness starts to feel real again. Not as glory, but as growth. Because it's in the moments you feel lost after winning that life is trying to remind you there's something greater than achievement, and it's alignment. You start seeing that maybe winning isn't supposed to feel like a celebration. Maybe it's supposed to feel like a transformation. And transformation always comes with grief. You mourn the person who needed the victory. You mourn the journey that's now behind you. You mourn the version of you that believed the finish line was the end. But the real ones know it's only the beginning. Because after you've lost yourself in the pursuit and found yourself in the process, the question becomes simple. What keeps the fire alive when everything else burns out? And that's where we go next. The fire that doesn't go out. Chapter 5. The fire that doesn't go out. You can't teach this kind of fire. You can light it. You can feed it. But you can't fake it. The kind of fire that doesn't go out. It's not about motivation. It's about meaning. It's what's left when the applause fades, when the reward isn't enough, and the pain still lingers. But you show up anyway. Obsession isn't sickness. It's a sacred focus. It's when you stop chasing what looks great and start becoming what endures. Most people think greatness is built on talent. It's not. It's built on repetition, on doing the thing again and again, long after the feeling has left. The fire that doesn't go out doesn't burn for excitement. It burns for evolution. It's not loud. It's consistent. It doesn't scream. It hums. It endures. Every empire that's ever lasted wasn't built by passion alone, but by people who refused to quit when passion disappeared. Because passion gets tiring. Obsession doesn't. Discipline is what remains. When every reason to stop sounds more convincing than the reason to continue. They'll call you intense. They'll say you're doing too much. And they're right. Because too much is exactly what it takes. You'll lose balance. You'll lose people. You'll lose comfort. But you'll gain something rarer. Control over yourself. That's what the fire teaches. To endure. To refine. To rise. It's not about the work itself. It's about who you become while working. Anyone can be great for a moment, but only the obsessed can be great for a lifetime. Because greatness isn't about moments of brilliance. It's about decades of consistency. It's waking up when you're exhausted, writing when the words won't come, showing up when no one's watching. That's the difference between dreamers and builders. Dreamers need conditions. Builders create regardless. The fire doesn't need perfect weather. It burns even in the rain. Because once you find something worth suffering for, comfort stops feeling like success. You start craving the hard days, the lonely hours, the grind no one sees. Because deep down, you know that's where you become unbreakable. It's not the easy wins that shape you. It's the days when you keep going, despite every reason not to. That's when the fire tests you. Not when things are going right, but when everything starts to fall apart. It whispers, "How bad do you want it?" And every time you push through, every time you refuse to fold, you prove something sacred. You want it more than you fear it. That's how greatness is built. Not in bursts of inspiration, but in invisible endurance. The fire that doesn't go out isn't fueled by success. It's fueled by why. And if your why is pure enough, nothing external can extinguish it. The real ones know this. Greatness doesn't ask for energy. It asks for identity. You become the work. You become the repetition. You become the message. And even when no one claps, you keep building. Even when no one sees, you keep showing up. Because you're not working for recognition anymore. You're working for mastery. There's a point in every journey where the fire becomes quiet, but it never dies. It becomes a hum behind your heartbeat, a rhythm that guides your motion. You stop needing proof. You stop needing pace. You start needing purpose. That's when the obsession transforms into devotion. You no longer chase achievement. You become it. And once you've tasted that level of focus, you can't go back to average. You'd rather fail at something meaningful than succeed at something shallow. Because the fire changes your standards. It changes your soul. And once it burns through everything false, what's left is real, raw, relentless purpose. Most people lose the fire because they mistake rest for weakness. But even rest, when done right, is part of endurance. The fire doesn't just burn. It breathes. It expands and contracts, but it never disappears. And that's how you know you're chosen for more. When you can't quit, even when you want to. Because the fire refuses to let you. It's not outside you anymore. It is you. So when the days get hard, when the world goes quiet, and the results don't match the effort, remember this. You don't keep going because it's easy. You keep going because it's yours. This is the price of being chosen. This is the reward of being relentless. You don't need motivation. You need memory of why you started and who you promised yourself you'd become. That's the secret of the fire that doesn't go out. It burns on remembrance. When the journey hurts, remember the dream. When the dream fades, remember the promise. And when the promise feels too heavy, remember, you've carried worse. The fire that doesn't go out isn't loud. It's loyal. It will walk with you through the seasons of doubt, carry you through the storms of exhaustion, and keep you standing long after others sit down. And one day, you'll look back at the ashes of what you survived and realize you were never chasing greatness. You were becoming it. But the higher you rise, the quieter it gets. The fire burns, but the air thins. And that's where few can follow. The isolation of the few. Chapter 6. The isolation of the few. The higher you rise, the quieter it gets. At first, you think it's peaceful. Then you realize it's isolation. Greatness separates you. not because you want to leave people behind, but because the altitude demands it. You can't breathe the same air when your purpose is climbing to a place others never intended to go. And what they don't tell you is that the price of elevation is isolation. When you start to build something bigger than yourself, you'll lose more than distractions. You'll lose connection. You'll lose comfort. You'll lose the sense of belonging. You once thought it was permanent. Because the few who chase greatness walk a road built for one. You'll look around and realize no one understands the weight you carry. Not because they don't care, but because they can't. They haven't lived through the quiet moments where your doubt gets loud enough to echo. They haven't stared at the work that once gave them meaning and wondered if it still does. They haven't sacrificed their laughter for late nights, their ease for excellence, their comfort for calling. So they can't understand, and you stop explaining. That's the first sign you're entering the rare air, when your vocabulary changes. You stop speaking for understanding and start moving for alignment. You learn that loneliness isn't a punishment. It's preparation. Isolation isn't the absence of people. It's the presence of purpose. The higher you rise, the fewer can breathe where you're going. And you start realizing, maybe it's not that people left you. Maybe they just weren't built for your altitude. The world down there runs on comfort. Up here, it runs on conviction. The noise down there demands approval. Up here, all you have is accountability. And sometimes, you'll miss it. You'll miss being understood. You'll miss being seen. But then you'll remember. You didn't climb to be understood. You climbed to become undeniable. That's the solitude of the few. The kind that transforms longing into focus. It's where distraction dies, and destiny finally has room to speak. There's no applause here, no validation, no reminders. Just you, your work, and the quiet hum of purpose. That's why most people never make it this far, because isolation exposes the truth. If you were doing it for them, you'll stop here. But if you were doing it for you, you'll keep climbing. Because once you've tasted purpose, you can't go back to a company built on comfort. You stop needing witnesses. You start needing progress. And that's when loneliness starts to transform. It stops feeling like abandonment and starts feeling like alignment. You realize you were never meant to have everyone around you. You were meant to have the right few beside you. And sometimes, that means none for a while. The greats talk about this part in whispers. The point where your mission starts costing your relationships. Where friends who once cheered you on start resenting your distance. Where love that once inspired you starts feeling like a chain. Where the ones who once said, "You've changed," start to sound like proof that you're evolving. That's when you understand. Growth isn't betrayal. It's separation by necessity. The ones who are meant to join you later will catch up. The ones who aren't were only meant for the start. You'll stop fighting that truth. You'll start accepting it. Because the few who endure this level of isolation come out with something rare. Clarity. Clarity about who you are, what you stand for, and what you'll never compromise again. The silence becomes less empty and more sacred, because in it, you start to hear yourself again, your own thoughts, at your own pace, your own standard. You stop moving for approval and start moving for alignment. That's the turning point, when isolation stops being loneliness and become a leader. Because leadership is never crowded. The few who carry vision always walk ahead of comfort. You'll learn to trust the distance, to stop apologizing for the solitude. You'll start realizing that silence isn't your punishment. It's your protection. The ones who can't handle your quiet were never meant to hear your calling. And the few who understand without words, those are your people. You don't need many. You just need something real. There's a peace that comes from accepting this. The peace of knowing that solitude doesn't shrink you. It sharpens you. It builds you into someone who can handle the weight that others can't even see. It teaches you patience. It teaches you presence. It teaches you to find strength in stillness. Not comfort, but control. Because the few who endure this stage don't come back the same. They return lighter, clearer, stronger. They no longer seek to be understood. They seek to be effective. And that's what separates the many from the few. Not talent, not luck, but endurance. Endurance to stay when it's lonely. Endurance to believe when it's quiet. Endurance to build when it's unseen. That's the isolation of the few. The place where your purpose outgrows your need for company. The world won't understand, but the world will remember. And when you finally learn to stand alone, you begin to see what truly kept you going. Not applause, not validation, but something deeper. The discipline to continue when nothing moves. The temptation to stop. Chapter 7. The temptation to stop. There comes a moment in every pursuit when the finish line doesn't excite you anymore. You're not tired of the work. You're tired of the waiting. The hours start blending together. The results stop showing up. And that quiet thought begins to whisper, "What if I stop?" At first, you laugh it off. You tell yourself you're stronger than that. You tell yourself you've come too far. But then the voice gets patient. It waits until you're weary, until the silence feels heavy, and the sacrifices feel pointless. That's when it speaks again, softer this time. No one would blame you if you quit. And for a moment, you believe it. Because greatness doesn't just demand strength. It demands endurance. And endurance hurts. It's not the kind of pain that screams. It's the kind that slowly drains you. Quietly, consistently, relentlessly. The temptation to stop never announces itself as failure. It arrives disguised as relief. It tells you you've done enough. It tells you it's okay to rest. It tells you the world won't notice if you fade. And that's the most dangerous lie, because part of you wants to believe it. You start remembering what it felt like to be light again, before the mission, before the weight, before the responsibility. You start imagining what it would be like to just disappear quietly, to let someone else carry the torch. But that's not you. You weren't built to almost finish. You weren't built to almost rise. You are built for what happens after the breaking point. Because the truth is, the real test isn't the climb. It's the choice to keep climbing. When the view stops changing. That's the edge where most people stop. Not because they're weak, but because they've mistaken exhaustion for ending. You've been here before, where rest feels like surrender, and surrender feels like peace. But you know the difference. You've learned that rest restores you, and quitting robs you. So you breathe. You pause. But you don't stop. Because the moment you stop, the fire begins to fade. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly, the same way passion once crept in. That's why the few who endure become legendary. They master the art of motion without applause. They move not because it feels good, but because it's right. They show up when no one's counting. They keep going when the reward feels distant. Because the greatest victories don't come from energy. They come from resolve. Resolve is different from motivation. Motivation is emotion. Resolve is a decision. And every great one you admire was built in the moment when stopping made the most sense. But they didn't. That's what separates greatness from potential. Potential stops when it's tired. Greatness begins when it's tired. When you've been stretched beyond reason, and there's no one left to tell you to continue, you become the voice that does. That's what it means to master yourself. You start building momentum, not from praise, but from pain. You start understanding that every step forward is defiance against the part of you that still remembers comfort. And every time you resist the urge to stop, you sharpen something invisible. Discipline. Discipline isn't glamorous. It's not a quote. It's not a mood. It's the quiet repetition of resilience. It's showing up tired. It's showing up uncertainly. It's showing up anyway. That's what makes the difference. Because when you learn to keep going, after the emotion leaves, you stop needing feelings to move. You move because it's who you are. The temptation to stop will always be there, but so will the reason you started. And that reason, if it's strong enough, will outlast every doubt that visits you. You'll learn that exhaustion isn't the enemy. It's the echo of progress. That pain isn't punishment. It's proof. And that quitting doesn't end the pressure. It just transfers it to regret. Because stopping doesn't make the weight disappear. It just makes you weaker when it returns. So you keep moving. You don't sprint. You don't rush. You just refuse to stop. You learn to pace your greatness. To give your best on the days you have the least. To find faith in fatigue. To turn resistance into rhythm. Because the moment you stop isn't when you're out of strength. It's when you've forgotten your reason. And that's what you must remember now. Why did you begin? You began because something inside you refused to settle. You began because comfort never satisfied your calling. You began because deep down, you knew this wasn't about winning. It was about becoming. So when the temptation to stop whispers, remind it, you've already survived worse. And you didn't come this far to end halfway through your becoming. The temptation to stop will come for everyone, but only the few understand. You don't outrun it. You outlast it. You let it visit. You let it speak. You let it pass. Because when you've mastered the art of not stopping, you've already won. That's the quiet power of endurance. It doesn't need speed to prove its strength. It just needs consistency. And every time you choose to continue, you become a little more unstoppable. And when you've learned to keep going, even when no one claps, even when no one believes, you'll start to face another truth. It's not the fear of starting that haunts you anymore. It's the fear of losing it all. Chapter 8. The Fear of Losing It All. You worked your whole life to get here. To rise above the noise. To build something that lasts. To finally feel safe in your success. And then one morning, you wake up afraid. Not of failing again, but of losing what you've already earned. It's a quiet kind of fear, the kind that hides behind achievement. You smile for the world, but deep down, you're holding your breath. Because when you've built everything from nothing, every good thing starts to feel temporary. You remember what it was like to have nothing, and the memory never really leaves. It follows you into every success, a shadow whispering, "What if it all disappears?" That's the unseen weight of greatness. The deeper you climb, the more fragile it feels. Not because it isn't real, but because you know what it costs to get here. You know the hours. You know the sacrifices. You know the silence that built it all. And the idea of losing it feels like losing yourself. That's the fear no one talks about. Not the fear of failure, but the fear of loss. You start to move differently, plan more, trust less, sleep lighter. Because the more you gain, the more you realize how fragile everything truly is. The world claps for your wins, but it never teaches you how to carry the weight of them. And no matter how much you achieve, a small part of you keeps scanning the horizon for what could go wrong next. That's the paradox of success. You fight so hard to be free, only to become prisoner to what you've built. You start protecting the crown, instead of earning it. And every day you wake up, you feel that tension between gratitude and fear. You're grateful for what you have, but terrified it won't last. So you overwork. You overthink. You overcompensate. Not because you want more, but because you're scared to lose less. That's the secret most never share. Success doesn't silence fear. It evolves it. Failure makes you afraid of not getting it. Success makes you afraid of losing it. And both can own you if you're not careful. Because fear doesn't care what side of the mountain you're on. It just wants your peace. You start realizing that the price of achievement isn't exhaustion. It's paranoia. You build more systems. You set more goals. You tell yourself you're being disciplined. But deep down, you're trying to control the uncontrollable. You can't control what stays. You can only control what you give. And that's the lesson this season is trying to teach you. Greatness doesn't mean never losing. It means learning how to lose without falling apart. You can't anchor your worth in what can disappear. You have to build it in what cannot. Because when the applause fades, when the money slows, when the spotlight shifts, you'll realize the truth. You were never afraid of losing things. You are afraid of losing yourself. That's the core of this fear. Confusing identity with outcome. But you are not your achievements. You are the person who built them. And that person, that resilience, that persistence, that faith, cannot be taken from you. That's the difference between those who crumble and those who continue. The first build for validation. The second build for meaning. Validation can be stolen. Meaning can't. So when the fear rises, when the thought of losing it all hits your chest, don't fight it. Breathe through it. Because fear is proof that you still care. It's proof that you still have something worth protecting. But what you're protecting isn't the trophy. It's the truth behind it. The truth that you built this once, and you could build it again. That's where the real peace begins. In knowing that what's inside you is greater than what surrounds you. Because when you understand that, loss no longer owns you. You could lose the title, lose the spotlight, lose comfort, and still not lose your foundation. That's power. Not the kind that demands control, but the kind that can let go. The kind that can fall and rebuild, without bitterness. The kind that can survive endings, without losing identity. That's what greatness really is. Not what you hold, but what holds you. You start realizing that everything you fear losing was only ever borrowed. And the moment you accept that, fear loses its grip. Because how do you scare someone who's no longer clinging? That's freedom. The peace that comes from surrender, not to failure, but to faith. Faith that no matter what leaves, you'll remain. That even if everything crumbles, you'll still have the strength to start again. And once you've tasted that kind of peace, fear can visit, but it can't stay. You'll stop guarding what you built and start protecting who you became. You'll realize that the true fear was never about losing it all. It was about losing control. And when you finally surrender that illusion, you'll find something far more powerful. Trust. Trust in your resilience. Trust in your preparation. Trust that you are not what you keep. You are what you continue to create. That's the only kind of greatness the world can't take from you. And once you've made peace with loss, you begin to see that the goal was never balance. It was acceptance. Because balance is a myth, and control is a burden. What's left is truth. The balance you'll never find. Chapter 9. The balance you'll never find. Everyone says you need balance. Work-life balance. Mind-body balance. Success-happiness balance. But the truth is, balance is a myth. It sounds peaceful. It looks beautiful on paper. But it doesn't exist in real life. Not for those who are building something extraordinary. Because greatness demands seasons, not symmetry. There will be times when you're consumed by work, by vision, by growth. And there will be times when you withdraw, to recover, to breathe, to remember who you are. That's not an imbalance. That's the rhythm. Balance implies stillness. But life moves in waves. You rise. You fall. You flow. And the few who truly live fully stop chasing balance and start mastering rhythm. Because balance says, do everything equally. But the rhythm says, do what this season requires. That's the secret. You can't give 100% to everything. You can only give 100% to what matters right now. Sometimes that's the work. Sometimes it's your healing. Sometimes it's just rest. The problem is, the world will call your rhythm imbalance, because it doesn't match theirs. They'll say you're too focused, too absent, too consumed. But they don't understand. You can't live an extraordinary life with ordinary proportions. You'll always be too much for a world addicted to moderation. You'll try to juggle it all, to please everyone, to sustain everything. And in that effort to balance, you'll burn out faster than ever. Because real peace doesn't come from perfect distribution. It comes from perfect presence. Being fully where your feet are. Not divided between what's next and what's now. When you work, work deeply. When you rest, rest fully. When you love, love completely. That's the kind of balance that actually exists. Not in scheduling, but in surrender. You'll learn that balance isn't about managing your time. It's about mastering your attention. The moment you stop multitasking your purpose, life starts to feel whole again. Because fragmentation kills fulfillment. You can't be everywhere and be effective anywhere. So you stop chasing evenness and start embracing alignment. You stop asking, how do I make it all fit? And start asking, what deserves me right now? The greats understand this. They know you can't build an empire and nurture every friendship at once. You can't chase mastery and live like you have endless time. You can't create something timeless while trying to please what's temporary. So they stop apologizing for imbalance and start owning their intensity. That's the paradox of peace. You only find it when you stop trying to please everyone else's version of it. You realize that fulfillment was never in balance. It was in alignment. You align your energy with your mission, your time with your truth, your attention with your priorities. And suddenly, the noise quiets. Not because life got easier, but because your focus got purer. You start to accept that something will always be missing. And that's okay. Because wholeness doesn't mean having everything. It means loving what you've chosen. That's the maturity that comes with greatness. Learning to live with the tension, instead of running from it. You stop chasing perfection and start mastering proportions. That's the art of balance the world never teaches. Not equal, but intentional. You give what's sacred your best. You give what's temporary your rest. And you let the rest fall where it must. You begin to see balance differently now. Not as stillness, but as flow. You start to understand that chaos isn't your enemy. It's the current you learn to move with. Because peace isn't the absence of motion. It's the grace to move without resistance. And that grace doesn't come from control. It comes from trust. Trust that even if today feels off, tomorrow will realign. Trust that you don't have to hold everything perfectly to still be progressing. Trust that imbalance doesn't mean failure. It means focus. And when you learn that, you stop punishing yourself for being human. You stop feeling guilty for giving your all to one thing at a time. Because you finally see that the pursuit of balance was never about peace. It was about permission. Permission to live fully, without apology. That's what you've been seeking all along. Not balance, but belonging to your own pace. And that, right there, is freedom. Freedom from trying to look even in a life meant to be extraordinary. Freedom to pour fully, to love deeply, to rest without guilt. Because when you stop chasing balance, you start living beautifully out of proportion, and perfectly on purpose. And when you stop fighting for balance, you discover something even rarer: peace. Not because life gets lighter, but because you do. And that's when you finally arrive at the quiet truth of greatness, the peace of paying in full. Chapter 10: The Peace of Paying in Full. You've given it everything. Your time, your heart, your peace. You've watched dreams rise and fall. You've watched people leave. You've watched yourself become someone you never expected, and someone you'll never regret. And now you've reached the part no one talks about, the quiet that comes after the cost. When there's nothing left to prove, nothing left to chase, nothing left to lose. This is what it means to pay in full. To give your best when it's no longer about winning. To stay steady when no one is clapping. To keep believing even when you've stopped seeking validation. You've learned what few ever do. That greatness doesn't reward you with comfort. It rewards you with clarity. And clarity always comes after the breaking. You thought peace would feel like arrival, but it feels more like surrender. You stop wrestling with what should have been. You stop chasing what might have been. You start breathing again. Fully. Finally. The peace of paying in full isn't soft. It's sacred. It's what remains when everything temporary burns away, and only truth survives the fire. It's not the peace that comes from rest. It's the peace that comes from resilience. From knowing you faced everything that tried to destroy you, and chose to stay anyway. That's the kind of peace the world can't give you, and it can't take it away either. You start to see things differently now. You stop resenting the weight. You start respecting it. Because every burden that once broke you was building you. Every disappointment was direction. Every ending was initiation. Every loss was proof that you were still willing to risk your heart. You start realizing, peace isn't about escaping the pain. It's about accepting its purpose. Because the pain was never punishment. It was permission. Permission to grow, to let go, to evolve into who you were meant to be. That's what it means to pay in full, to face the price without resentment, and to find meaning in the debt. You start to forgive yourself for the years you pushed too hard, for the people you couldn't keep, for the joy you postponed for later. And in that forgiveness, peace finally finds you. Because peace doesn't come when life stops hurting. It comes when you stop fighting what it's teaching. You've stopped asking, why me? You've started asking, what for? And that small shift changes everything. Because when you see meaning in the struggle, you stop seeing yourself as a victim of the story, and start seeing yourself as its author. And authors don't beg for better chapters. They write them. That's the peace of paying in full. When you realize you owe no one an apology for who you became in the process. You've earned this peace, not by achieving everything you wanted, but by surviving everything you didn't expect. You've earned the right to breathe without rushing, to love without fear, to walk without proving. That's the quiet reward of those who stayed the course. You no longer need the world to clap, because your soul is finally silent, not from defeat, but from understanding. Understanding that the crown was never made of gold. It was forged in patience. It's the lightness that comes after carrying everything alone, the grace that comes after forgiveness, the wisdom that comes after pain stops demanding explanation. This peace doesn't make life easier. It makes it enough. Enough to rest without regret. Enough to build without bitterness. Enough to live without longing for something else. Because in the end, you'll realize something that only those who paid in full ever understand. You were never meant to win effortlessly. You were meant to endure beautifully, to love deeply, to give completely, to walk courageously through the fire, until it stopped scaring you. And now, when you look back at the scars, you don't see wounds. You see proof. Proof that you survived. Proof that you gave everything. Proof that you were willing to pay the price. That's the kind of peace the world can't touch, because it's not built on ease. It's built on endurance. So you rest now, not because you're done, but because you've earned the right to continue at peace. You no longer rush the process. You trust it. You no longer beg for outcomes. You attract them. And you no longer measure greatness by gain, but by grace. That's the peace of paying in full, when the striving ends, but the purpose remains. And now, you're ready for what comes after endurance, the becoming. There's a strange calm that follows the fire, when everything you fought to hold has already fallen away, and what's left is only what was meant to stay. You stop searching for closure. You start seeing completion. Because after the price has been paid in full, something beautiful begins to glow in the quiet. Not the noise of victory. Not the weight of achievement. Just light. Soft. Still. Unshakable. It's the light that doesn't come from success. It comes from surviving it. And that is where the story ends. And eternity begins. Choosing to move with peace. To lead without applause. To keep going when it's quiet. That's what separates the great from the almost. They almost chase recognition. The great chase refinement. They almost seek comfort. The great seek clarity. They almost give up when it stops being easy. The great give everything, even ease itself. Because they know. Ease never built empires. Sacrifice did. And that's what makes you one of them. One of the few. The ones who stayed long enough to pay the price completely. So as this chapter closes, remember this. Greatness never happens in front of them. It happens within you. The applause fades. The lights dim. The journey ends. But the peace stays. Because you've earned it, not through perfection, but through endurance. You didn't just build a life. You built a legacy of resilience. And now, you finally understand the truth about greatness. It was never about reward. It was always about willingness. Willingness to rise when you fall, to give when you're empty, to walk when you're tired, to love when it still hurts. That's what the great ones all have in common. Not talent, not luck, but the courage to stay. And you stayed. That's why you're here, among those who paid in full. The price of greatness was never too high. It was simply everything you had. And you gave it, willingly, because deep down, you always knew you were meant to. If this message spoke to you, share it, subscribe, keep listening. This is Beyond the Noise Studio.